My son was 11 days old when my husband slid the divorce papers across the kitchen counter. He was still in his work clothes. I was in the same nursing shirt I had worn for 3 days. My son was asleep against my chest, his tiny mouth open, his fingers curled around nothing. I looked at the papers. I looked at my husband, and then I did something he did not expect. I asked him for a pen. I signed every page without saying a single word. Then I handed them back, looked him directly in the eyes, and said 4 words that I want to tell you about right now. Because what happened in the next 60 days is why I am sitting here telling this story instead of the one he thought he was going to tell. My name is Claire Whitmore. I am 37 years old. I live in a house in Charlotte, North Carolina that I own outright. My son Lucas is 14 months old. He is the best thing that has ever happened to me, and he was the best thing that happened to me even on the night his father handed me divorce papers while I was holding him. I need to tell you who I was before I tell you what happened, because this story does not make sense without that context. I spent 12 years building a career in corporate finance. Not the glamorous kind you see in movies, the kind that means spreadsheets at midnight, quarterly reports on weekends, the specific exhaustion of being the person in the room who actually understands what the numbers mean and has to explain them to people who do not want to understand but need to sign off anyway. I was good at it, not in a way I needed other people to confirm. I knew my own work. I knew when I was right. I knew when the model held, and I knew when it was going to fail, and I was almost always right about both. I met my husband Nathan at a conference in 2016. He was in commercial real estate development, tall, easy to talk to, the kind of confidence that reads as competence, until you know someone well enough to understand the difference. We dated for 8 months and got married in a small ceremony in Asheville in 2017. My parents came, his sister came, 26 people total, in a vineyard on a September afternoon. I want to be honest about our marriage from the beginning, because dishonesty would make this story simpler than it actually was. We were not unhappy for most of it. We were busy and sometimes parallel, 2 people running 2 separate professional lives who came home to the same house, but often existed in different orbits. Nathan traveled frequently. I worked long hours. We had the kind of marriage that functions extremely well on paper and requires more deliberate attention than either of us gave it. When I got pregnant in early 2024, it was planned, not in the clinical sense, just wanted and decided and hoped for. Nathan was enthusiastic in the way he was enthusiastic about most things, immediately, vocally, and then gradually less present as the reality of it settled in. 3 appointments. He came to the anatomy scan. He did not come to the last 4. I told myself he was busy. He was always busy. That was the story I had been telling myself for 7 years, and it was not entirely false, and it was not entirely true. Lucas was born on a Thursday in March, 41 weeks, 12 hours of labor. Nathan was there for the first 6 and left to take a work call at hour 7 and came back at hour 11. He held Lucas for 4 minutes in the delivery room before his phone buzzed again. I watched him answer it. I did not say anything. I held my son and I thought, this is the moment where I understand something I have been not understanding for a long time. The first 11 days of Lucas's life were the hardest of mine. Not because of Lucas. Lucas was what newborns are, hungry and loud and completely dependent, and more beautiful than anything I had ever seen in my life. I loved him with a specific ferocity that I think only new mothers understand. Not soft and gentle love. Sharp, protective, absolute love. The kind that reorganizes your priorities in a way you cannot undo. The 11 days were hard because Nathan was not there. Not in the dramatic way. He had not left. He was in the house. He was in our bedroom sleeping a full night while I fed Lucas every 2 hours. He was in his home office on calls while I sat on the bathroom floor at 3 a.m. with a baby who would not stop crying and no one to hand him to. He was at his company's dinner on day 6, apologizing that he could not cancel. He was at a site visit on day 8. He was present in the technical sense. He was absent in every way that mattered. I did not ask him to do more. That is something I have thought about in the months since. I did not ask. I had spent 7 years not asking, because I had built a life on handling things myself, and somewhere along the way that independence had become invisibility, and I had let it become that. On the evening of day 11, Nathan came home from the office at 7:30. Lucas was asleep on my chest. I had not eaten the real meal since the morning. I had not showered. The kitchen was functional, but barely, and I was sitting at the counter because sitting at the counter was the only place that kept Lucas in the right position. Nathan put his bag down by the door. He loosened his tie. He looked at me for a moment with an expression I could not read. Then he reached into his jacket. He pulled out an envelope. He set it on the counter in front of me. He did not say anything at first, just stood there on the other side of the counter and watched me look at it. I knew what it was before I opened it. I do not know how I knew. I just knew. The particular weight of the envelope, the specific way he was standing. 11 days of absence that had been building towards something even when I did not want to name what it was building toward. I opened it with one hand. Lucas still sleeping on my chest. Divorce petition. His name on the filing. My name in the respondent box. The grounds, irreconcilable differences. The date, that afternoon. He had filed that afternoon. While I was at home with our 11-day-old son, he had been at an attorney's office. I read it through once. I said, "Do you have a pen?" He blinked. He had not expected that. He had expected something else. Tears, questions, anger. He had rehearsed for a different version of this conversation. I could see him recalibrating. He found a pen, handed it to me. I signed every page, slowly, clearly. My signature the same way it always was. I handed the papers back. I looked him in the eyes. Then I said the 4 words, "You keep the debt." He stared at me. I said nothing else. I stood up slowly, careful not to wake Lucas. Then I walked upstairs. I heard him standing in the kitchen behind me. I heard him say my name once. I did not answer. I went into the nursery, sat in the rocking chair, and sat there in the dark until Lucas woke up hungry again. Nathan slept in the guest room that night. I do not know if he slept. I fed Lucas at midnight and 2 and 4, and as the sun came up I was already making a list. I need to explain what Nathan did not know, not because I was hiding it from him, because he had never asked. Nathan and I had combined some of our finances when we married, but kept separate accounts for our individual incomes. His suggestion, 7 years ago, framed as financial independence and personal autonomy. I had agreed because it seemed sensible, and because I did not yet know what that structure would mean later. What Nathan knew about our shared financial life was what I had shown him. Joint checking, joint savings, the mortgage on the Charlotte house, the shared investment account. What Nathan did not know, what he had never asked about, because he had never been interested in the details of. My professional life, the way I had been interested in his, was the rest. I had spent 12 years in corporate finance. I understood asset structure. I understood how to build a financial position that was both legal and not immediately visible. Not hidden in any fraudulent sense, just organized in ways that required specific knowledge to interpret. When we got married, I had kept my personal investment portfolio in my own name. It had grown significantly over 7 years. I had made decisions about that portfolio with the same precision I applied to my professional work. When Nathan launched his real estate development company 3 years into our marriage, he had needed startup capital. He had asked me for a loan, not an investment, a loan, with a signed promissory note at my insistence, because I worked in finance and I knew the difference between family money and legal obligation. He had signed the note. His attorney had reviewed it. It was standard, repayable on demand with 30 days' notice. It had never been repaid. Not a single payment in 4 years. And the amount, with the interest we had agreed on in writing, had grown to something significant. When Nathan's attorney filed the divorce petition that afternoon, he had filed based on what Nathan knew about our shared assets. He did not know about the promissory note. Nathan apparently had forgotten about it entirely, or assumed it did not matter, or assumed I would never invoke it. When I said you keep the debt, I was not being vague. I was being precise. I called my attorney the next morning. Her name was Diane Marsh. I had retained her 3 weeks before Lucas was born, because I am someone who plans, and because something in the last months of my pregnancy had told me I should know exactly where I stood. I told her what had happened. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You signed the petition?" I said yes. She said, "That was actually fine." Signing acknowledges receipt. It does not mean you agree to his terms. I said, "I know." I told her about the promissory note. She was quiet again. Longer this time. Then she said, "Claire, this changes the entire picture." Nathan left the house 4 days after I signed the papers. He packed 2 suitcases. He was polite and careful and did not look at me directly. He said he would be in touch through the attorneys. He said he hoped we could make this easy. He said he was sorry for the timing. The timing. Our son was 15 days old. I did not say any of those things out loud. I stood at the kitchen counter with Lucas, and I watched Nathan carry his bags to his car, and I let the door close behind him, and I thought, you have no idea. Diane filed a response to the divorce petition within the week. The response included, as an attachment, a certified copy of the promissory note. It also included a formal demand letter for repayment in full within 30 days, as specified in the original agreement. Nathan's attorney called Diane 3 hours after the filing. Diane told me later he sounded, in her words, surprised. Nathan called me that evening. I answered. "What is this?" he said. His voice was controlled but tight underneath. "It is a promissory note," I said. "The one you signed 4 years ago. Your attorney reviewed it." "That was for startup capital," he said. "That was family money." "No," I said. "It was a loan with a signed agreement. You said you wanted it structured properly. Those were your words." A long silence. "You can't do this," he said. "I am not doing anything," I said. "I am simply responding to the legal process you started. If you file for divorce, we settle all outstanding obligations. That's how it works." Another silence. Then his voice shifted, quieter. "Claire, be reasonable. We can work this out without—" "I need to feed Lucas," I said. "Your attorney has Diane's number." I hung up. Lucas was not actually hungry. He was asleep in the carrier against my chest, but standing there with him, calm and warm and breathing, was the clearest I had felt since the night Nathan put the envelope on the counter. What happened over the next 60 days was not dramatic in the way people imagine revenge to be dramatic. There were no confrontations, no public scenes, no moments designed for an audience. What happened was arithmetic. Nathan's company had been financed partially by the loan I was now calling due. That loan had gone into the initial operating expenses of his development firm. The firm had grown, but growth in real estate development is often more visible than it is liquid. Nathan had revenue on paper. He had projects in various stages. What he did not have, right now, was the cash to repay a demand note on 30 days' notice. His attorney tried 3 different approaches over 6 weeks. The first was to challenge the enforceability of the note. Diane's response was thorough, and the challenge did not hold. The second was to propose a payment plan. I declined through Diane. The promissory note specified repayment in full. I had signed a full repayment agreement, and I expected one. The third was to request mediation on the divorce terms simultaneously so that the note could be considered as part of the overall settlement. I agreed to that one. Mediation happened on a Tuesday morning, 6 weeks after Nathan had left with his 2 suitcases. We sat on opposite sides of a conference table with our respective attorneys and a mediator named Robert Chen, who had been doing this for 20 years and who had the specific patience of a man who had seen every version of this situation. Nathan had lost weight. He looked like a person who had not been sleeping well. He looked at me when I walked in, and I saw something in his face that I recognized as the expression of someone who has been spending 6 weeks revising the story they told themselves about who they were dealing with. Robert Chen opened the session with a summary of assets and liabilities. When he reached the promissory note and stated the amount, including 4 years of agreed interest, I watched Nathan's jaw tighten. "Are you prepared to settle this as part of the divorce agreement?" Robert asked me. "Yes," I said, "on appropriate terms." "What are appropriate terms?" I looked at Nathan, then I said it. "The house in full, my legal fees, and a fair co-parenting agreement that centers on Lucas." Nathan's attorney put his pen down. He looked at Nathan. Nathan was looking at the table. "That is the value of the note," Diane said calmly. "We are simply proposing that the settlement reflect outstanding obligations rather than requiring a cash payment." The room was quiet for a long time. Nathan said, "The house is where I plan to live." I said, "You left 11 days after our son was born." Another quiet. Robert Chen looked at both of us. He said, "I think we should take a short break." During the break, Nathan's attorney pulled Diane aside. I sat in the waiting area with a coffee I did not drink, and Lucas's pacifier in my pocket, because I had become the kind of person who carries a pacifier in every jacket without thinking. My mother had come to stay with Lucas for the day. She had arrived from Virginia 2 weeks after Nathan left, without me asking, the way good mothers arrive, when they understand something is happening that their daughter needs not to face entirely alone. She had not said much about Nathan. She had cooked and held Lucas and been quietly present in the way I had needed. Diane came back from the side conversation with an expression I recognized. Controlled, professional, but carrying something underneath it. She sat down beside me. "He is going to agree to the house," she said. I looked at her. "Not because he wants to," she continued, "because he doesn't have another option that does not. Cost him more than the house is worth. His attorney has reviewed the note. It is airtight. A forced repayment would require him to restructure his business. The house is cleaner." I sat with that for a moment. "What about Lucas?" I said. She nodded. "He is agreeing to the co-parenting terms you outlined. 40-60 in your favor during the infant stage, with renegotiation at 18 months. Child support as specified." I looked at the window. Outside, Charlotte was moving through its normal Tuesday. Traffic, construction, people going places that had nothing to do with what was happening in this building. "Okay," I said. She studied me for a moment. "How are you doing?" I thought about that honestly. "I am tired," I said, "but I am clear." She nodded once. "That is the right combination," she said. We went back in. The agreement was signed by 3 in the afternoon. Nathan and I did not speak directly during the signing. But as we were leaving, in the hallway outside the conference room, he stopped. He looked at me. Really looked. The way he had not looked in months. He said, "I did not understand what I was doing." I considered that. "I know," I said. He shook his head slightly. 4 words. "You keep the debt." "How long had you been planning that?" I looked at him. "Since about 2 in the morning, on the night you left the delivery room to take a phone call," I said. He was quiet. "I am not saying that to hurt you," I continued. "I am saying it because I think you should understand that decisions have a longer history than the moment they happen." He nodded. Once. Slowly. "Tell Lucas. He will know his father," I said. "That is up to you, not me. I am not going to take that from him, but the rest is on you." I walked to the elevator. Diane was behind me. I pressed the button and waited, and did not look back. The doors opened. I stepped in. That was the last conversation Nathan and I had that was about us. Everything after that has been about Lucas. Lucas is 14 months old now. He pulls himself up on the furniture and then looks at me with the specific triumphant expression of someone who has done something impressive and knows it. He has 4 teeth, and he has opinions about food that are strongly held and frequently expressed. He sleeps through the night now, which felt impossible in those first weeks, and is now simply Tuesday. I still live in the Charlotte house. The house is mine. Lucas has the bigger bedroom with the window that gets the morning light, the one I painted a soft gray-green before he was born, because the color was calming, and I had needed calm things. Nathan sees Lucas every other weekend. He shows up when he says he will, which is the minimum, and also, I have learned, not something to take for granted. He is learning how to be a father in the way some people learn things, late and imperfectly, but genuinely. I am watching that happen without feeling the need to control it. My mother came back in the spring and stayed for 6 weeks. She taught Lucas to wave, and she reorganized my kitchen without asking, and I let her, because some things are not worth the argument, and she was right about where the glasses should go. I went back to work part-time at 4 months, full-time at 7. My position had been held, which I had negotiated before my leave, with the specific thoroughness I apply to everything that matters. My manager had told me I was irreplaceable, which I knew was partially professional courtesy and partially true. I'm not going to tell you that everything is easy. That would be the wrong story. Some mornings Lucas is fussy, and I am tired, and the coffee maker does something inexplicable, and Nathan sends a text about the weekend schedule that is worded in a way that requires a response I have to compose carefully, and the whole texture of managing a life alone is present and real, and I feel it. But I am not managing Nathan's absence. I am managing my own life. There is a difference that I could not fully articulate until I was living it. Managing someone's presence when they are not fully there is an invisible labor that does not announce itself. You do not know how much of your energy it takes until it stops being required. I have that energy now. I use it differently. I use it on Lucas, on my work, on the slow and deliberate process of building a life that is entirely and accurately mine. Here is what I have been thinking about in the 14 months since Nathan put that envelope on the counter. He expected me to fall apart. Not cruelly, I think, not with malice. He expected it because he had a version of me in his head that was defined by what he could see. And what he could see was a woman who was 11 days postpartum, exhausted, alone in the kitchen of her own house with a newborn asleep on her chest. He did not see the promissory note. He did not see 12 years of professional knowledge about exactly how financial obligations work. He did not see the attorney I had retained 3 weeks before Lucas was born. He did not see any of that, because he had spent 7 years not asking about any of it, not because he was malicious, because he had not been paying attention. This is what I want you to hear if you are in a place where someone is underestimating you. Underestimation is not always an act of cruelty. Sometimes it is simply the result of someone paying attention to the wrong things for long enough that they have built a version of you that does not include your most important qualities. The version Nathan had built of me did not include what I actually knew, what I had actually built, or what I was actually capable of when something that mattered to me was at stake. Lucas mattered to me. My security mattered. The house where my son would grow up mattered. When those things were at stake, I did not become someone different. I became fully, clearly, without apology, the person I had always been. He saw it, finally, in the hallway outside the mediation room when he asked how long I had been planning it. Since about 2 a.m. on the night you left the delivery room. What I meant by that, what I did not say because some things do not need to be said, is that clarity does not come from planning. It comes from paying attention. I had been paying attention to our marriage for years. I had seen what it was. I had loved him anyway.
and built a life anyway, and tried anyway. And when it ended, I was ready. Not because I wanted it to end, because I had never stopped knowing exactly where
I stood. You keep the debt. 4 words. He thought I was being cold. I was being precise. There is a difference. I learned it in 12 years of finance work. Precision is not coldness. Precision is the kindest thing you can offer someone who is not paying attention to reality. With it, without any confusion about what is actually happening. Nathan came into contact with reality in a conference room on a Tuesday in Charlotte. It cost him the house. It cost him the narrative he had planned. It cost me 7 years and 11 very hard days. I would not trade Lucas for anything. Not the hard nights, or the harder days, or the specific loneliness of being the only person awake in a house at 4 a.m. with a baby who needs you completely. I would not trade what I understand now about my own capacity. If you have ever been in a room where someone handed you something that was supposed to be the end of your story, and you felt something inside you go very still and very clear instead of breaking, you know exactly what I am describing. That stillness is not weakness. That clarity is not coldness. It is you knowing who you are. It is you knowing what you have. It is you understanding that the person across the table has made a significant error in their assessment of the situation. My son is asleep upstairs right now. His window gets the morning light. The house is quiet in the way houses are quiet when they belong to you fully, and you know it. That is enough. That is more than enough. If this story stayed with you, if you have ever been handed something that was supposed to be your ending and turned it into your beginning, tell me in the comments. I read every one. And if you have not subscribed yet, I would be glad to have you here for the next one.